The docking clamps release with a sound, like a held breath finally let go, and Ren steps onto Conclave Station, carrying a thermos of coffee that went wrong, temperature somewhere past the third transit gate, and a repair kit that may or may not contain the right sockets. She stops just inside the airlock to let her eyes adjust. Conclave Station is enormous, in the way that things built by committee tend to be too many corridors. None of them quite the same width, the lighting calibrated to please 6 species simultaneously, and therefore not quite right for any of them. The air tastes like copper and recycled mineral water. Ren's knees register the gravity differential before the rest of her does. A half-second lag that makes her feel like she's walking on a ship that hasn't finished deciding where down is. Technician Ren. The voice comes from her left. She turns. The being waiting for her is Kethalee. She'd read the briefing on the transport, which told her they were 4-armed, bioluminescent in patterns that shifted with mood, and extremely formal in initial greetings. The briefing had not adequately conveyed the way the light moved under their skin, slow and cool like something seen through deep water. The counselor's outer 2 arms were folded across their midsection in what the briefing said was a gesture of formal receipt. The inner 2 hung at their sides. "Counselor Saveth," Ren said, and attempted the Kethalee greeting. She'd practiced a slight forward incline of the head, eyes briefly closed. She'd probably gotten it wrong. The counselor's bioluminescence flickered something she couldn't read. "Your vessel's arrival was timely," Saveth said. Their standard was precise, almost over-precise. The way it got when translated through a system that had been taught the language from formal texts. "The array has been deteriorating for some months. Tensor. And one. Tensor. And wanted." The work order said, "Minor calibration issues." "Yes." A pause that felt considered. The technician who filed the work order has not been here recently. Ren looked at her repair kit. Then she looked at the corridor ahead. Then she adjusted her grip on her thermos and said, "Well, let's go see it." The communications array occupied its own pressurized bay near the station's outer ring, and it was not a calibration issue. It was a disaster that had been having a quiet conversation with entropy for longer than anyone had apparently chosen to notice. 3 of the primary relay nodes had been rerouted around a burnt-out secondary so many times the bypass architecture had started to look like something a nervous person had done with their hands while trying not to think about a problem. 2 of the signal amplifiers were running at 60% capacity, with their warnings silenced. The environmental housing for the whole eastern bank had a slow leak that had been patching itself, unsuccessfully, with a film of mineral deposits. Ren set her thermos on the only clear surface she could find, a diagnostic panel that was at least currently not in crisis, and pulled open her kit. "How long?" she asked. "Has it been in this condition?" Saveth stood near the entrance, which she was coming to understand was a Kethalee thing they preferred to observe from a slight distance before approaching. "Approximately 14 months. And nobody." She stopped herself. The why. Didn't anyone questions were rarely useful, and always made the client defensive. She crouched instead and looked at the base of the nearest relay node, tilting her head to read a part number in the bad light. "Nobody," Saveth confirmed anyway, with something in their voice she couldn't quite place. Not quite embarrassment. More like the particular resigned quality of someone who has been saying times, "This will become a problem," times for 14 months, and has just watched it become one. Ren's scanner found the burnt relay on the 3rd pass. She pulled it, looked at it, set it aside. Pulled the next one. Looked at it, set it aside. The counselor watched her work in silence, which was pleasant. Some clients talked the whole time, which split her attention in ways that led to mistakes. She was elbow-deep in the secondary bypass architecture, trying to understand what exactly the original technician had been thinking when the alert tone sounded. Not a maintenance alert. Something else. Something with more harmonics. Saveth's bioluminescence went very still. Ren had not needed the briefing to understand it was the same thing a person did when they were trying very hard not to react. Counselor. A moment. Savith had their hand to an earpiece, speaking rapidly in Kethali, that the translator was only partially catching something about confirmation, something about trajectory. Their inner arms, she noticed, had crossed over their midsection now. All 4 arms folded. She'd read that too. Maximum self-containment. She waited. The alert tone cycled again. There is a signal, Savith said finally, turning to face her. The light under their skin had shifted less blue, more in the amber range. From deep space. It is the council is convening. I must. They paused, recalibrated. The array. Can you continue? Ren looked at the mess in front of her. I can get you basic receive function in about 2 hours if I improvise. Improvise. Work with what's here instead of what should be here. She held up the burnt relay. This is useless. But I think I can reroute through the lighting control bus for the Eastern Bank. It's not rated for it, but it'll hold long enough. Savith looked at the burnt relay, then at the lighting bus, then at Ren. Their expression was one she would later learn was a Kethali attempt to decide whether someone was being serious. That seems inadvisable, yes, but functional. She pulled a coupling from her kit. Hand me that mounting bracket. The silver one. On the panel behind you. Savith looked at the panel, found the bracket, handed it over, carefully, with their lower left hand extended. Ren took it and got back to work. The counselor stayed. 2 hours and 11 minutes later, the array came back online with a sound like something that had been holding its breath for a very long time, finally deciding to breathe. Ren sat back on her heels and drank the rest of her cold coffee while the diagnostic ran. And the signal from deep space resolved from noise into something with structure, with pattern, with intention. Savith leaned over the readout. The blue had gone entirely from their bioluminescence. What does it say? Ren asked. It is not a language in our current records. Savith's voice was careful in the way voices got when they were choosing each word. But the council has older records. We are... The signal pulsed again, steady and patient as a heartbeat. It's a fleet, isn't it? Ren said. It wasn't quite a question. Savith looked at her. The amber light under their skin shifted, just slightly, toward something cooler. Yes, they said. A very old one. The council chamber went very quiet in the way that large rooms go quiet when everyone in them has just understood something terrible. Ren stood in the observation gallery she'd been brought here while the chamber below was still filling, ushered to the upper level with the careful politeness of someone being placed somewhere that was technically a courtesy and practically a removal from the room. She watched through the transparent barrier as beings of 12 different species settled into their stations. Savith was below, at the Kethali seat, their bioluminescence entirely stilled to a flat, pale nothing she'd never seen before. She couldn't hear the full proceedings from the gallery. What came through the feed was partial, translated in real time by a system that was clearly struggling with some of the older terminology being used. She caught fragments. 800 years. Believed extinct. Conflict records sealed. Human involvement classified at times, and then a burst of static she suspected was not accidental. A young Kethali aide, barely adult, luminescence still shifting with every thought in the chaotic way of the young, appeared at her elbow. Counselor Savith asks that you remain here during deliberations, they said. For your comfort and security. Right, Ren said. What's a Vorath? The aide's bioluminescence went the same pale nothing as Savith's had. They left without answering. Ren turned back to the window and watched the council argue. She picked up pieces. The fleet was Vorath, and the Vorath had been the word the translator kept offering was times eradicated, which it then second-guessed to times ended, which it then walked back to times lost times, before giving up and offering all 3 options simultaneously. The records were 800 years old and partial, and some of them had been sealed, and the reason they had been sealed appeared to be, from what Ren could gather, something to do with humanity. She was the only human on the station. She watched Savith below, standing now, speaking. The other counselor's body language was she didn't know most of their species well enough to read it, but she knew argument when she saw it. She knew the posture of someone saying times, "This is what we should do" times, and the posture of 10 other people saying times, "Absolutely not." The aide came back. "The council requests that you accept temporary relocation to guest quarters while—" "I'd like to hear the signal," Ren said. "The signal is being analyzed by—" "I'd like to hear it myself." She kept her voice even. "I'm a communications technician. That's the thing I'm here for. Let me do the thing I'm here for." The aide looked at her. Their bioluminescence flickered through 3 colors she couldn't name. "Counselor Savith has not authorized." "Then ask them." There was a pause while the aide communicated with someone she couldn't see. Then Savith appeared in the gallery doorway, which surprised her. She hadn't expected them to leave the chamber. "Ren." They looked tired in a way that was legible across species. "The council has determined that for your safety—" "I'm not going to guest quarters," Ren said. "I'm going back to the comms bay. I want to hear what they're saying." "You cannot translate Vorath." "I know. But I can tell you things about the signal itself. Transmission characteristics. Whether it's compressed, whether there are multiple layers, whether they're waiting for a response." She picked up her kit. "And I've heard enough to know that the council is arguing about what to do with me. I'd rather be doing something useful while you do that than sitting in a room thinking about it." Savith looked at her for a long moment. The light under their skin moved in slow pulses, not the amber of stress, not the pale nothing of shock, but something in between that she hadn't catalogued yet. "You are not afraid," they said. It came out sounding less like an observation and more like a question they hadn't meant to ask out loud. "I'm a lot of things," Ren said. "Afraid is in there. But I've got work to do." She walked past them, back toward the comms bay. And after a moment, she heard Savith follow. The signal was beautiful, in the way that things built with precision and purpose were beautiful regardless of what they contained. Ren sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the main receive terminal. The chair was calibrated for a species with a very different center of gravity, and she'd given up on it and listened with her eyes closed and her hands still in her lap. The Vorath word repeated at 23-second intervals. One word. The same word. Patient. And relentless as a tide. She'd been listening for 40 minutes when she found the second layer. There. She opened her eyes and pulled up the frequency display. Under the primary broadcast. "It's faint here. You see this?" She pointed. "The carrier wave has a modulation that doesn't match the main signal. It's not interference. It's intentional." Savith leaned close, studying the display. Their outer arms were still folded across their chest. "What does it mean?" "I don't know yet. But the main signal is using a very narrow frequency band. Extremely stable. This modulation pattern is something else more complex. It's a different kind of communication." She pulled up the pattern on a separate display and stared at it. "The main signal feels like a statement. This feels like a question." "A question," Savith repeated. "I could be wrong. But the main signal doesn't vary. It's broadcasting the same thing over and over, which is what you do when you want to be heard. This undertone is it changes slightly each cycle. It's listening for something. One. Listening." Savith looked at the display. Then at Ren. Then at the display again. Ren. "The word they are broadcasting. The translation the council retrieved from the old records." They paused. "It is not Time's War. The older records give a more precise translation. It is closer to Time's Reckoning." Ren looked at the signal pattern for a long time. "They want to be answered," she said. "That is a dangerous assumption." "Maybe." She looked at the undertone frequency, the one that changed, the one that listened. "But they've been traveling for how long?" At the speed the fleet is moving, the transit from their last known location would be. Savith paused, and she heard something shift in their breathing. Approximately 800 years. 800 years in a fleet, broadcasting one word, patient as a heartbeat, waiting. They want to be answered, Ren said again. It wasn't an assumption anymore. A question deserves an answer, Ren said, and the council looked at her like she had suggested something obscene. She'd been given 5 minutes to address the chamber, which Savith had negotiated with what she gathered was considerable political cost. She stood at the human-height podium the station kept for rare occasions and looked out at 12 species in various states of alarm. The fleet has been broadcasting for 800 years, she said. The undertone frequency changes every cycle. It's looking for a specific response, something keyed to the original signal. If they'd wanted to attack, they'd have attacked. They're 4 days out, and they have not launched anything, and they have not changed course, except to slow down. They are waiting. They are waiting, said the Drevathi counselor, a being of many jointed limbs who clicked when they moved, because they have not yet arrived. They're waiting because they are waiting, Ren said. The undertone is patient. It's not a countdown. It's an ear. You are a communications technician, said another counselor, species she didn't know, voice like plates shifting. You are not a diplomat. You are not a xenolinguist. You are not. I'm the one who found the second layer, Ren said. And I'm the one who can hear the difference between times we are coming to destroy you. Times and times, is anyone there? The fleet is saying both. And I want to answer the second one. Two. The chamber was quiet. The human will not transmit anything on behalf of this council, said the counselor with the shifting plate's voice. I know, Ren said. I'll transmit on behalf of myself. She had not cleared this with Savith. She had decided this 3 hours ago. Sitting on the floor of the comms bay, listening to the signal change its question over and over in the dark. And she had not told anyone because she had known, with some certainty, that they would try to stop her. She transmitted from the comms bay, with Savith standing in the doorway and 13 council security officers standing behind them, and all of them watching her send a message in a frequency modulation pattern that matched approximately, probably, she hoped the undertone of the Vorath signal. The message was simple. She had spent 3 hours on it. We hear you. We are here. We are listening. Then she sat back and drank the last of a second thermos she'd found a heating unit in one of the equipment lockers. Bless whatever engineer had left it, and waited. The fleet stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Full stop. 4 days out. Every vessel in the formation, coming to rest simultaneously with a precision that said times, we have been practicing this for 800 years. Then, after 11 minutes that nobody in the comms bay breathed through, the fleet changed course. Toward the station. The council's response was, predictably, fragmentation. Savith relayed the arguments while Ren finished running a diagnostic, a thing to do with her hands, a thing to do while her heart rate came back down to something reasonable. Some counselors wanted to evacuate. Some wanted to go dark. 3 of them, apparently, wanted to arm the station's defense systems, which were nominal at best and had not been tested since the last administration. Ren fixed a stuck relay while she listened. Then she fixed the environmental housing that had been leaking mineral deposits for 14 months because she'd been meaning to get to it and now seemed as good a time as any. She found the fault in the life support redundancy system that the diagnostic had flagged 3 days ago and never been checked. She freed an airlock that had been sticky for she didn't ask how long. You are repairing things, Savith observed, from the doorway. The station needs it. The station may not. Savith stopped. Need it for long? Ren looked at them over her shoulder. Maybe. But it needs it now. She turned back to the airlock calibration. Hand me the torque adjuster. Left side of the kit. Savith found it. Handed it to her. They had stopped questioning this exchange. the handing of tools sometime in the last 2 days. And Ren appreciated it. "Your thermostat has been wrong for 3 years," she said. "Ah, yes." A pause. "How did you—" "You keep adjusting your outer arms when we're in your office. You're too cold." She tightened the last bolt. "I can fix it before they get here if you want." Savith's bioluminescence moved in a long, slow wave she was starting to recognize. Not quite any of the categories she'd named before. Something that looked, if she had to guess, like being unexpectedly known. "Yes," they said quietly. "I would like that." The Vorath ship was larger than anything currently in the Galactic Registry, and it was also, somehow, clearly, very old. Not damaged, maintained. With the particular care of something that mattered immensely to someone. It docked at the station's largest bay, with a gentleness that surprised her. One figure emerged. The Vorath were, she had found nothing in the ship's records that matched them. The being who walked down the docking ramp was tall and still, and covered in something that was not quite scales, and not quite chitin. The surface of them fractured into patterns that caught the light like a broken mirror. Their eyes were multiple and amber, and all of them were looking at her. Ren walked forward to meet them. The council security officers had offered to accompany her. She had thanked them, and declined. Savith had said times Ren times in a particular tone, and she had said times I know times and walked through the airlock anyway. She stopped about 4 meters out. The Vorath commander stopped at the same moment, which told her something. The translator she'd brought, the portable unit, the one she'd calibrated herself, worked for approximately a third of what the commander said. And it was clearly working with fragmentary records, but she got the shape of it. The Vorath commander had expected a warrior, or a representative of whatever governing body had 800 years ago made certain decisions. They had expected someone who would explain, or apologize, or negotiate terms. They had not expected a woman in a technician's uniform carrying a thermos. The pause was very long. Ren let it be long. The Vorath commander said something. The translator offered, "You are not." "No," Ren agreed. "I'm not." She considered. "I'm sorry about that." The council wanted to send someone more official, but they argued about it for too long, and I'm the one who answered your signal, so. She shrugged, which probably didn't translate. "I'm Ren. I fix things." The commander looked at her. All those amber eyes, unreadable and patient, as the signal had been patient. The translator caught fragments of what came next. 800 years. We were told. We were promised. The reckoning was, "I know," Ren said, which was not entirely true. But she knew the shape of it. She knew what 800 years of carrying something looked like. She knew the frequency of it. She had heard it for 4 days. "I know. I'm sorry I don't have the answers you came for. I think the people who had those answers are gone." She paused. "I think that's part of what made this so hard to carry." The Vorath commander was very still. Ren set her thermos down on the docking bay floor, sat down cross-legged next to it, because her knees were starting to register the gravity again, and because sitting down in front of someone was the oldest possible signal she knew. "Tell me what happened to you," she said. The Vorath commander stood for a long moment that might have been considering or might have been deciding whether this was real. Then they sat. They talked for 3 hours and 14 minutes. Ren's translator managed perhaps 60% of it, and she asked for repetition, and she got it. The commander had been talking in fragments, correcting themselves, starting over, because 800 years of a story was not easy to summarize even in your own language. She listened to all of it. She asked questions. She said times I don't understand that part. Can you? Times, and the commander, each time, patiently tried again. She learned that the Vorath word the fleet had been broadcasting was not precisely times reckoning. It was closer to times witnessing. The difference mattered enormously. They had not come for revenge. They had come to make sure someone knew, someone acknowledged, someone looked at what had happened and said times, "Yes, That was real. You were real. This matters. 800 years. One word. All of that. Just to be witnessed. At the 2-hour mark, she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. She knew the particular sound of Savith moving the slight extra weight on the inner feet. The careful deliberateness of them. A cup appeared in her peripheral vision. And then another one beside it. One was the human blend she'd been drinking from her thermos. The other was something amber dark that she recognized as Kethali steep, a thing Savith drank mid-morning. A habit she'd noticed because they always made a specific sound of relief at the first sip. Savith set both cups on the floor between Ren and the Vorath commander. Said nothing. Did not interrupt. Stepped back. The Vorath commander looked at the cups. Then, at Savith, retreating to the wall. Then, at Ren. Ren picked up her cup. Raised it slightly, which was a human gesture that probably meant nothing to them. But she did it anyway. "Keep going," she said. "I'm listening." The commander, she would not learn their name until 2 days later, when the translators had been properly calibrated, looked at the cup for a moment longer. Then they looked at Ren, with all those amber eyes. And they kept going. Savith stayed. They sat against the wall with their own cup of steep, still, and quiet, watching two species conduct the strangest first contact in living memory. Their bioluminescence was soft and slow, and very blue the color. Ren would later learn that Kethali showed when they were in the presence of something they did not have a word for yet, something that required a new word, something that they were only beginning to understand would have to be added to their accounting of what the universe contained. Outside the viewport, the Vorath fleet waited at rest, patient as they had been patient for 800 years. The station hummed around them. The repaired array sang quiet data into the dark. Somewhere in the corridors, a thermostat held exactly the right temperature for the first time in 3 years. Ren drank her coffee and listened. And the galaxy shifted by a degree so small that most instruments would not have caught it. The kind of degree that only mattered across centuries, and did.